There is no sound more terrifying in the modern world than the sudden, gasping death of a showerhead when you are fully lathered in peppermint-scented body wash. 1 second, I was enjoying the hot cascade of water, mentally preparing for a Tuesday morning meeting that could make or break my quarter. The next second, thunk. A hollow metallic rattle echoed through the pipes, followed by a pathetic dribble, and then silence. I stood there for a moment, blinking, the peppermint suds beginning to migrate dangerously close to my tear ducts. I turned the knob left. Nothing. I turned it right. Nothing. I tapped the showerhead, as if it were a faulty microphone. "Hello?" I asked the tiled wall. "Is this a joke?" It wasn't a joke. It was Florida. It was 98 degrees with 90% humidity at 7:30 a.m., and I was currently a marinating peppermint stick with no way to rinse off. I stumbled out of the shower, grabbing a towel and wiping the stinging foam from my eyes, and my first thought was a water main break. Maybe a sinkhole had swallowed the neighborhood's plumbing. That happens here. But when I turned on the sink faucet, I didn't get the sputtering cough of air that usually signals a break. I got the absolute dead silence of a shut-off valve. I wrapped the towel tighter around my waist, grabbed my flip-flops, and marched downstairs, leaving a trail of soapy footprints on the hardwood. I went out the front door, looking like a budget Greek philosopher who'd had a rough night, and headed straight for the utility strip near the sidewalk. There it was. My water meter box lid was skewed open, and sitting there, gleaming in the morning sun like a beacon of bureaucratic malice, was a heavy-duty red padlock shackled around my main valve. Attached to it was a neon orange tag that fluttered lazily in the humid breeze. I squatted down, squinting against the sun. The tag read, in bold, aggressive font, "Service suspended. Violation of HOA bylaws, SEC 4. Para. C. Non-payment." "Non-payment?" I muttered, my voice cracking with indignation. "I have autopay." "It's not for the water bill, Jack." The voice came from behind me. I didn't even have to turn around to know who it was. The nasal, condescending tone could only belong to one person. Brenda. Brenda was the HOA president, a woman who treated the neighborhood of Whispering Palms not as a residential community, but as her own personal, terrifying ant farm. She was standing on the sidewalk, holding a clipboard against her chest like a shield, wearing a floral blouse that was aggressively bright for this hour of the morning. She was smiling. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just trapped a very soapy gazelle. "Brenda," I said, standing up and trying to maintain dignity while wearing nothing but a towel and a layer of drying soap scum. "Why is there a lock on my water?" "I told you," she said, tapping the clipboard with a pen. "Non-payment of death. Fees." "I pay my HOA dues on the 1st of the month," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "I have the bank receipts. I pay the water bill through the county. What fees?" "The processing fee," she said, as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler. "The what?" "The processing fee for the online portal," Brenda clarified, taking a step closer, smelling faintly of lavender and absolute power. "You see, last month, the board voted to switch our payment processor to Secure HOA Pay. There was a notification sent out via the newsletter." "The newsletter that goes to the spam folder?" "It is your responsibility to whitelist official HOA communications, Jack," she snapped. "Because you didn't update your payment information to include the new $3 convenience charge, your automatic payment for the monthly dues was technically short. Specifically, you were short $3. You shut off my water over $3? I felt a vein in my forehead begin to throb. The peppermint soap was starting to itch. "No," Brenda said, looking delighted to correct me. "We shut off your water because the $3 discrepancy triggered a late fee. The late fee is $10, plus an administrative notification fee of $25. Since those fees weren't paid within 48 hours of the automated email, which I assume you also ignored, your account fell into delinquent status. Section 4, paragraph C, clearly states that the association reserves the right to suspend utilities for any account in delinquency over 30 days or exceeding $50 in fines. You're currently at $38, but since you have a history of attitude, the board voted to expedite the suspension." "A history of attitude?" I repeated. "You mean that time I told you that measuring my grass with a ruler was weird behavior? It was 2 millimeters over regulation, Jack. Rules are rules." I took a deep breath, inhaling the humid air. I was sticky. I was angry. And I was talking to a woman who probably counted the number of petals on her begonias to make sure they were symmetrical. "Okay," I said, reaching into my non-existent pocket before remembering I was in a towel. "I will pay you right now. I'll go inside, get my wallet, and give you $40 cash. Keep the change. Just unlock the valve." Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh, Jack, you know I can't take cash. That would be a liability. You have to pay via the portal." "The portal requires internet," I said, "and I can't go inside and use my computer comfortably because I am covered in soap." "Use your phone," she suggested helpfully. "Fine, I'll use my phone. I'll pay it right now. Then you unlock it." She shook her head, her perfectly sprayed helmet of hair not moving an inch. "It doesn't work like that. Once payment is submitted, it has to be verified by the treasurer. That takes 3 to 5 business days. Then a work order is generated to remove the lock. That's another 2 business days. You're looking at next Tuesday, probably." My vision blurred slightly. "Next Tuesday? You expect me to live without running water for a week? Over $10? "You should have thought about that before you ignored the newsletter," she said, turning on her heel. "Have a nice day, Jack. And do try to rinse off. You look ridiculous." She walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement, leaving me standing there, a soapy, towel-clad monument to impotence. I went back inside. The house was cool, but my skin was burning. The soap had dried into a crusty, itchy film. I grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, my last one, and used it to wash my face over the kitchen sink. It wasn't enough. I felt grimy. I felt violated. I tried to go to the gym. I drove 20 minutes to the Swole and Fitness Center where I had a membership, mostly for the sauna I never used. I walked up to the front desk, scanned my badge, and nothing. The turnstile remained locked. The little light blinked red. The guy at the counter, a teenager named Kyle, whose biceps were larger than my head, looked at his screen. Says here your membership is frozen, dude." "Frozen? Why?" "Card declined. Something about insufficient funds?" I checked my banking app. My account was fine. Then I saw it. A freeze. A distinct legal freeze on my assets. I called the bank, sitting in the parking lot of the gym, sweating in my car. "Yes, sir," the cheerful robot voice representative said after 20 minutes of hold music. "We received a lien notification this morning." "A lien?" I screamed. "From who?" "The Whispering Palms Homeowners Association. They filed a fast-track lien for unpaid assessments and legal fees. When a lien is filed, we automatically freeze the associated accounts until the dispute is resolved." "Legal fees?" I choked out. "It was $38. According to the document, the legal filing fee was $500, plus a rush processing fee of $200. The total lien is for $738. I hung up. I sat there in the parking lot, staring at the dashboard. Brenda hadn't just shut off my water. She had nuked my financial orbit from space. She knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't about the money. This was about dominance. This was about the time I didn't vote for her re-election 3 years ago. I drove home in silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed to think. I needed a plan. When I got back, I saw the HOA landscaping crew trimming the hedges around the community pool, which sat directly behind my backyard. The pool was Brenda's pride and joy. It was a shimmering turquoise rectangle of perfection, surrounded by imported Italian tile and white deck chairs that were cleaned daily. The water sparkled, mocking me. I walked into my backyard, the grass crunching under my feet. It was dry. We were in a drought, and water restrictions were in place. Yet the community pool was always topped off. I went inside and opened my laptop. I didn't go to the HOA portal. I didn't go to my bank. I went to the county archives. I spent the next 6 hours reading. I read every bylaw, every statute, every piece of paper related to Whispering Palms. I read the original land survey from 1988. I read the zoning permits. And then, buried in a PDF scan of a microfiche document from 1924, I found it. The Florida Homestead Water Access Act of 1924. It was an archaic law, written back when this part of the state was nothing but swamp and cattle ranchers. It stated in surprisingly plain English that every deeded property owner had the inalienable right to access the subterranean aquifer for survival. If the municipal or shared supply was unjustly restricted or rendered potable inaccessible. Crucially, it noted that no covenant, association, or local ordinance shall impede the construction of a well for personal sustenance if the primary water source is severed. I sat back in my chair. A slow smile spread across my face. Brenda had shut off my primary source. She had done it for a debt that was arguably administrative, not utility-based. By locking that valve, she had triggered the 1924 Act. I wasn't just allowed to dig a well. I was federally, or at least state statute mandated, encouraged to do so. But I didn't just want water. I wanted justice. I wanted to make noise. I wanted Brenda to feel the vibration of my indignation in her teeth. I opened a new tab and searched for water well drilling contractors. I filtered by industrial and heavy duty. I found a website that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2005. It had animated flames on the banner. The company was called Earth Shatter Drilling. The slogan was, "We bore it, you pour it." I dialed the number. "Earth Shatter," a voice grunted. It sounded like the guy had been gargling gravel. "Hi," I said. "I have a bit of an emergency. I need a residential well drilled, but I have a specific request." "Yeah." "I need it done fast, and I need it done deep. And honestly, if you have the loudest, biggest rig you own available, I'll pay extra." There was a pause on the other end. "You got a permit?" "I have a 1924 statute and a locked meter," I said. "I can get the emergency variance from the county clerk online in about 10 minutes." "I like the sound of that," the voice said. "Name's Dan. Most people call me Dozer. I can be there tomorrow at 6 a.m. My rig's named the Penetrator. She ain't subtle." "Perfect," I said. "Dozer, bring the Penetrator, and bring the biggest drill bit you have." "You expecting to hit oil?" "No," I said, looking out my window at the pristine, shimmering surface of the community pool. "I'm expecting to hit a nerve." I spent the rest of the night printing documents. I taped the notice of intent to drill to my front door. I taped a copy of the 1924 statute to the HOA signboard. I taped a copy to Brenda's mailbox. Technically illegal, but I was past caring. I didn't sleep well. I was sticky, thirsty, and adrenaline-wired. But when the sun began to crest over the horizon the next morning, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, I was sitting on my front porch in a lawn chair, holding a lukewarm can of soda I'd found in the back of the pantry. At 5:58 a.m., the ground began to tremble. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a rhythmic, heavy thrumming that grew louder with every second. The birds in the trees stopped singing and took flight. A dog barked in the distance, sounding terrified. Then, around the corner, it appeared. It was a truck, but calling it a truck was like calling Godzilla a lizard. It was a flatbed semi carrying a drilling rig that looked like it belonged on an asteroid mining mission. It was painted a violent shade of yellow, covered in grease and mud, and it was belching black smoke from twin stacks that reached for the heavens. The penetrator was stenciled on the side in jagged red letters. Dozer Dan was behind the wheel. He saw me, honked a horn that sounded like a freight train derailment, and pulled up onto my lawn. Not the driveway. The lawn. The massive tires, each the size of a Toyota Corolla, crushed my decorative petunias. They flattened the St. Augustine grass. The rig hissed as the air brakes engaged, sounding like a dragon sighing. I stood up and walked over. The door opened, and a man stepped down. He was 6'5", shaped like a vending machine, wearing a hard hat that had seen war and a sleeveless shirt that revealed tattoos of pistons on his biceps. "You Jack?" he asked, spitting something brown onto the pavement. "I am," I said. "You're just in time. Where do you want it?" I pointed to a spot in the side yard, approximately 10 feet from the property line. The property line I shared with the community pool. "Right there," I said. "As deep as she goes." Dan grinned. It was a terrifying sight. "Let's wake up the neighbors." He climbed back into the cab. The engine roared. The hydraulic stabilizers extended, driving into the earth with a crunching sound that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. The tower raised up, blocking out the sun, casting a long, phallic shadow directly across the street and onto Brenda's house. I saw Brenda's curtains twitch. Then her front door flew open. She came running out, her silk robe flapping, her face a mask of absolute horror. She was screaming something, but I couldn't hear her over the idling diesel engine of the apocalypse parked on my grass. She sprinted across the street, dodging a squirrel, and arrived at the edge of my property just as Dan engaged the main drill motor. "What is this?" she shrieked, her voice barely audible over the mechanical whine. "What is this monstrosity?" I walked over to the edge of the property line, holding my paperwork. "Good morning, Brenda," I shouted, cupping my hands. "Just doing some landscaping." "You can't park that here. This is a residential zone. Commercial vehicles over 3 tons are banned." "It's not a commercial vehicle, Brenda," I yelled back, channeling every ounce of petty rage I had stored up. "It's a medical necessity device. I need water to live. Check the statute." I thrust the paper at her. She slapped it away. "I'm calling the police," she screamed, her face turning a shade of purple that clashed with her robe. "I am calling the police, the sheriff, and the National Guard. You are going to jail, Jack. You are going to prison." "Call them," I yelled, pointing at the rig as the drill bit, a massive, spiraling corkscrew of hardened steel, began to spin. "But you might want to stand back. She spits mud." Dan pulled a lever. The drill slammed into the earth. The sound was indescribable. It was a grinding, tearing screech that felt like the earth itself was screaming. Dirt and grass flew into the air. The ground shook. A car alarm went off 3 houses down. Brenda covered her ears and stumbled back, her mouth open in a silent scream. I sat back down in my lawn chair, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and cracked open my warm soda. The drilling had begun. And the best part? We hadn't even hit the rock layer yet. The first hour was mostly just noise and dust. The neighbors had gathered in a semicircle about 50 yards away, phones out, filming. It was a spectacle. The drilling rig was louder than a jet engine, and every time the hammer dropped, a shockwave rippled through the subdivision. Officer Miller arrived at 7:15 a.m. I liked Miller. He was a guy who just wanted to make it to his pension without having to draw his weapon or fill out triplicate forms. He rolled up in his cruiser, lights flashing but siren off, and parked behind Dan's truck. Brenda was on him before he could even get the door open. She was fully dressed now, in her power suit, and she was pointing wildly at me. I walked over to the curb, removing my headphones. "Officer Miller?" I said pleasantly. "Nice morning for a geological survey." "Jack," Miller sighed, adjusting his belt. He looked tired. "Brenda says you're building a missile silo." "She's dramatic," I said. "I'm drilling a well." "A well," Miller repeated, looking up at the 50-foot steel derrick towering over my ranch-style house. "With that?" "It's hard soil, officer. We needed the big guns." "It's illegal!" Brenda screeched. "He's violating 12 statutes. He's blocking the view. He's creating a noise nuisance. Arrest him!" "Brenda, let me see the permit," Miller said, holding up a hand. I handed him the packet. The county emergency variance, the 1924 statute, the proof of my water shutoff. Miller put on his reading glasses. He read slowly. He read the part about the right to water. He read the part about the HOA's inability to restrict vital access. He looked at the red padlock on my meter, which was still visible. "You shut off his water, Brenda?" Miller asked. "He didn't pay the fees." "So he's drilling a well," Miller said, handing the papers back to me. "According to this, Judge Holloway signed off on the emergency variance yesterday afternoon digitally. It's valid." "That judge is senile," Brenda yelled. "That judge is my father-in-law," Miller said dryly. "And his signature is valid. Brenda, you need to step back. This is a construction zone." "You're not going to stop him?" "I can't stop a legal construction project, ma'am. If you want to stop him, go to court. Until then, stay behind the sidewalk. It's for your safety." Brenda looked like she was going to have a stroke. She vibrated with rage. "This isn't over, Jack. I will bury you in litigation." "I'm already digging, Brenda," I smiled. "Save yourself the trouble." Miller got back in his car. "Keep the dust down if you can, Jack." "Will do, officer." Miller drove off. Brenda stormed back to her house, presumably to call her lawyer or summon a demon. I gave Dan a thumbs up. He revved the engine. "All right, boss," Dan yelled over the roar. "We're hitting the limestone shelf. It's gonna get bumpy." Bumpy was an understatement. When the drill hit the Florida limestone, the vibration changed pitch. It went from a rumble to a judder. My windows rattled in their frames. The coffee in my mug, which I had made using bottled water heated on the stove, developed ripples. By noon, we were down 60 feet. The pile of dirt in my front yard was becoming a small mountain. Dan climbed down for a lunch break. He was covered in gray dust. He looked like a statue come to life. "Tough rock," he said, biting into a sandwich that looked like it was made of pure meat. "But we're close. I can smell the water." "How can you smell water through rock?" "I'm a professional," he said. "Listen, Jack. There's something you should know. When we punch through the cap rock into the aquifer, there's going to be a pressure release. Sometimes it's a little burp. Sometimes the surrounding geology shifts a bit. Shifts how? Sinkholes are common in these parts, Dan shrugged. We create a void, pressure changes, things settle. Usually it's fine, but if there's any unstable structures nearby... He glanced at the community pool behind my house. The pool, I said. Yeah, that pool. It's heavy, lot of water weight pressing down on the soil. If that soil is sandy, which it is, and we vibrate the hell out of it. Will the pool crack? Maybe, Dan grinned. Or maybe it just gets a little tilted. I looked at the pool. Brenda was there now, setting up for her board member mixer scheduled for 2 p.m. There were catering trays being laid out. Balloons. A banner that said, "Celebrating Excellence in Community Standards." Dan, I said seriously. Keep drilling. You got it, boss. Dan climbed back up. The engine roared to life. At 1:45 p.m., the guests started arriving for the mixer. Men in polo shirts and women in sundresses gathered by the pool, sipping iced tea and glaring at my drilling rig. Brenda was holding court, pointing at my house and clearly recounting the morning's events. At 2 p.m., Dan switched to the percussion hammer mode. Bam, bam, bam. It sounded like a giant was punching the earth. The ground jumped with every strike. At 2:15 p.m., I saw it. I was watching from my kitchen window. The water in the community pool, usually calm and glass-like, began to slosh. It started as a gentle wave, back and forth. But as the frequency of the drill hit a resonant pitch, the waves got bigger. Slush, slush, slush. Water spilled over the edge, soaking the shoes of the treasurer. He jumped back, dropping a deviled egg. Brenda looked around, confused. She grabbed the metal railing of the pool ladder to steady herself. And then it happened. There was a sound that wasn't mechanical. It was a deep, earthen groan. A crack that sounded like a gunshot echoed through the backyard. Dan yelled something, but I couldn't hear it. The entire pool deck, the concrete slab, the tiles, the tables, the catering, suddenly shifted. It dropped 3 inches on the side closest to my yard. Brenda screamed. The banner, "Celebrating Excellence," ripped in half. The catering table, which was on wheels, began a slow, majestic roll toward the deep end. "Stop!" Brenda shrieked at the table, as if it were a disobedient child. The table didn't listen. It rolled over the edge. A platter of shrimp cocktail, a punch bowl, and 3 dozen cupcakes plunged into the water. But the water wasn't staying. A fissure had opened up at the bottom of the pool. A visible, jagged crack running right down the center lane. The water began to swirl. A vortex formed, sucking the shrimp, the cupcakes, and the pool water down into the dark abyss of the earth. It was draining. Fast. "It's draining!" someone yelled. "The pool is draining!" "Do something!" Brenda yelled at the lifeguard, a 16-year-old kid named Timmy, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the galaxy. "What do you want me to do?" Timmy asked. "Plug it with my foot?" In my yard, things were getting interesting too. "Jack!" Dan yelled, waving from the rig. "She's blowing!" "What?" "The well, pressure reversal!" Before I could ask what that meant, the drill hole exploded. A geyser of brown, muddy, limestone-rich sludge shot 40 feet into the air. It arced beautifully over the fence. It cleared the property line. And with the precision of a guided missile, It rained down upon the pool deck. It splattered the guests. It coated the white vinyl chairs. And it absolutely drenched Brenda, who was standing at the edge of the rapidly draining pool, watching her empire collapse. She stood there, frozen, as the mud dripped from her nose. The pool was now half empty, a concrete bowl filled with shrimp and despair. I walked out my back door, holding a fresh can of soda. "Hey, Brenda!" I called out. She turned slowly to face me. She looked like a swamp monster. "You destabilized the pool!" she shrieked. "You terrorist! You destroyed the pool!" "I didn't touch the pool," I said innocently. "I'm just digging a well. Looks like you guys had a leak. You really should have maintained that foundation better. Section 8, Paragraph B of the bylaws. Common areas must be maintained to prevent geological hazards. Sounds like a violation to me." The fire trucks arrived 5 minutes later. The fire chief, a stern man named Henderson, walked into the backyard. He looked at the empty pool. He looked at the geyser of mud in my yard, which Dan had finally managed to cap. He looked at the crack in the earth. "All right," Henderson said. "Everyone out of the pool area. This is a sinkhole event. We're condemning the deck until a structural engineer clears it." "You can't condemn it," Brenda Tissot cried. "We have the summer solstice party next week." "Ma'am, there is a giant hole in the bottom of your pool," Henderson said. "The party is canceled." Brenda turned to me, her eyes burning with the fire of 1,000 suns. "You are paying for this, Jack. Every penny. I will take your house. I will take your car. I will take your soul." "Good luck with that," I said. "But first, you might want to check your own liability insurance. I'm pretty sure catastrophic structural failure due to deferred maintenance isn't covered." She lunged at me. The treasurer had to hold her back. As they dragged Brenda away, still screaming about bylaws and vengeance, I turned to Dan. "So," I said, "did we hit water?" Dan wiped the mud off his face and grinned. "Oh yeah, best flow rate I've seen in years. You could bottle this stuff." "Good," I said, "because I really need a shower." Part 5. The Aftermath and Legal War. The silence that fell over Whispering Palms that evening was heavy. The drilling rig was gone, replaced by a sleek, capped wellhead in my side yard that Dan had installed before leaving. The community pool, however, was a crime scene. It was wrapped in yellow caution tape. The empty basin gaped open like a concrete mouth, smelling of chlorine and dead worms. I took the best shower of my life that night. The well water was cold, crisp, and possessed a pressure that could peel paint off a wall. I stood there for 45 minutes, just because I could. The next morning, the legal assault began. A process server knocked on my door at 8:00 a.m. He handed me a thick envelope. Brenda hadn't wasted time. It was a lawsuit from the HOA seeking damages for gross negligence, destruction of property, emotional distress, and loss of community enjoyment. They were asking for $2.5 million. I called my lawyer, a guy named Saul, no relation to the TV show, though he wished. Saul was a real estate attorney who hated HOAs almost as much as I did. "Jack," Saul said after I emailed him the documents, "this is hilarious." "Hilarious isn't the word I'd use for a $2 million lawsuit, Saul. No, listen, they're claiming you caused the sinkhole. But remember that engineer report from 3 years ago? The one you showed me when you bought the place? The one about the soil composition? Yeah. I dug it up. It explicitly warned the HOA that the pool shell had microfractures and was leaking into the sandy substrate. It recommended immediate remediation. Do you know what they did? They retiled the patio, I said, remembering the newsletter. Exactly. They put lipstick on a pig. They ignored a structural warning to make it look pretty. By drilling nearby, you might have triggered the collapse. But legally, you just poked a balloon that was already popping. This is proximate cause gold, Jack. And wait until you hear what the city engineer found this morning. What? The city engineer was out there an hour ago. He red-tagged the pool. He estimates the pool has been leaking about 1,000 gallons a week into the ground for 5 years. That's why the soil was mush. Technically, Brenda has been undermining your property with her leaky pool, not the other way around. We're not just going to get this dismissed. We're going to counter-sue for endangerment of foundation. I felt a weight lift off my chest. So I'm good? You're better than good. You're bulletproof. But Jack, it's going to get ugly before it gets pretty. Brenda isn't going to stop. Saul was right. Brenda didn't stop. She started a smear campaign. She posted on the neighborhood Facebook page, which I was banned from, but my neighbor Steve sent me screenshots. Jack is a danger to our children, the post read. His illegal drilling has ruined our community hub. Property values will plummet. He is a terrorist. She organized a protest. Literally, a protest in front of my house. 6 retirees stood on the sidewalk with signs that said, "Ban the drill," and "Jack hates children." I countered by setting up a sprinkler in my front yard. I attached it to my new well. It oscillated back and forth, spraying a glorious arc of free water. "Free water!" I yelled from my porch. "Unlimited! Clean! No fluoride!" The protesters looked thirsty. It was 99 degrees. One of them, old Mr. Henderson, actually stepped into the sprinkler mist when Brenda wasn't looking. The climax of the war came 2 days later at the emergency board meeting. It was held in the community center, since the pool deck was condemned. The room was packed. Everyone was there. Brenda sat at the head table, looking like a deposed queen plotting a beheading. "We are here," Brenda announced into the microphone, "to discuss the special assessment required to repair the pool. Due to the Domestic Terrorism Act committed by a certain resident." She glared at me. "We are facing a repair bill of $400,000. This will require a special assessment of $5,000 per household." The room exploded. "$5,000?" screamed Mrs. Higgins, a lady who usually only spoke to her cats. "I don't have $5,000. "It is necessary," Brenda shouted over the din, "to restore our property values." I stood up. "Madam President?" "Sit down, Jack," Brenda snapped. "You have no floor privileges." "Actually," I said, projecting my voice, "I do. I'm a member in good standing. My dues are paid." "You are in arrears." "No," I said, holding up a certified letter. "I paid the $10 late fee, and the $25 fee, and the $3. It cleared yesterday. I am a member, and I have a document I'd like to share." I walked to the front of the room. Brenda looked like she wanted to tackle me, but Officer Miller was standing by the door, watching. I held up the city engineer's report that Saul had sent me. "This is the official report on the pool collapse," I said. "It states, and I quote, the collapse was caused by long-term subterranean erosion due to a persistent leak in the pool shell, likely present for 4 to 6 years. The structural integrity was compromised long before any external vibration occurred." I paused for effect. The room went silent. "Furthermore," I continued, "the report notes that the HOA was notified of this risk in 2021 and chose to allocate funds to aesthetic improvements instead of structural repair. This means neighbors that Brenda knew. She knew the pool was leaking. She knew the ground was turning into mush. And she spent our money on white deck chairs instead of fixing it. I turned to Brenda. Her face had gone pale. So, I said, the question isn't why I drilled a well. The question is why we are paying for Brenda's negligence. Why should we pay $5,000 each for a problem she ignored? Lies, Brenda shrieked, standing up. He's lying. It's a fake document. By the city. Engineer, Brenda, I said. And here's the kicker. My insurance company is suing the HOA for endangering my foundation. And since the board acted with gross negligence by ignoring the leak, the HOA's liability insurance might not cover it, which means the board members could be personally liable. The other 4 board members, sitting next to Brenda, suddenly looked very uncomfortable. They started inching their chairs away from her. I didn't know, the treasurer squeaked. She handles the contractors. You signed the checks, Bob, I said. The room turned. It was palpable. The anger, which Brenda had carefully directed at me, swung around like a boomerang and hit her square in the face. Motion to remove, someone yelled from the back. Seconded. You can't do this, Brenda yelled. I am the president. I am the law. You're a liability, Brenda, I said quietly. They voted. It was a slaughter. A vote of no confidence. Brenda was out. The entire board was dissolved, pending an emergency election. Brenda stood there, stripping the gavel. She looked at me with pure hatred. You ruined everything, she whispered. No, Brenda, I said. You ruined it yourself. All over a $10 late fee. Part 6. Victory Lap. 2 weeks later. The neighborhood was quiet again. The caution tape was still up around the pool, but the repairs were underway. The new interim board, led by Steve, the guy who sent me the screenshots, had negotiated a payment plan, so no special assessment was needed yet. They had also fired the property management company and secure HOA pay. We were back to paper checks. I was in my front yard, tending to my lawn. And let me tell you, my lawn was magnificent. Thanks to the well, I had unlimited, nutrient-rich water. While the rest of the neighborhood was brown and crispy due to the drought restrictions, my grass was a lush, vibrant emerald green. It was so green it looked fake. I had also expanded my garden. I planted tomatoes, peppers, and even a row of corn along the property line, just to hide the view of the broken pool. I was watering the corn when I saw her. Brenda was walking her poodle. She looked smaller somehow. She wasn't wearing her power suit. She was wearing sweatpants. She looked tired. She stopped when she saw me. She looked at the water spraying from my hose. She looked at my green grass. Then she looked at her own lawn across the street, which was dead and yellow. She licked her lips. It was 95 degrees out. Hot day, I said cheerfully. Brenda didn't say anything. She just stared at the hose. You know, I said, spraying a mist into the air that created a small rainbow. If you need to water your petunias, Brenda, I'd be happy to help. Neighborly love and all that. She narrowed her eyes. You would? Sure, I said. I can run a hose over to your place. Fill up a few buckets. She hesitated. Her pride was warring with her desire for hydrangeas of the hydrangeas. One. That would be appreciated, she muttered, her voice barely audible. Great, I smiled. I'll hook it up. Just one thing. What? She snapped, the old suspicion returning. I have to charge for the infrastructure, I said. Wear and tear on the hose. Pump electricity. Fine, she huffed. How much? I leaned on my shovel, grinning. $10, I said, plus a processing fee. Brenda's face went red. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at me, then at the water, then back at me. She let out a sound that was half scream, half groan, yanked on the poodle's leash, and stormed off down the street. I watched her go, chuckling to myself. I turned the nozzle back to the corn. The water hissed, cool and sweet. I took a sip from the hose. Tasted like victory.